Hi, this is Phil Klemmer, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide. My name's Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 40 for Friday, November 4th, 2011. Well, today I'm so excited to bring you an interview with someone that I actually met in Los Angeles back in 2009, and no stranger to Chuck fans, and that is Phil Klemmer. He's been with Chuck since season 1, and is a great writer. He used to write on Veronica Mars. He wrote for all 4 seasons with Rob Thomas, who was on the podcast just a few episodes ago, and then he went on to Chuck, and I actually had a pretty great interview with him back in season 2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I did with a couple of the other Chuck writers, I'm going to replay that interview now. I guarantee that it'll seem fresh to you even if you heard it back in season 2. It's a great look back at what Chuck was like back in season 2 and with the attitude in the room, and also a great time visiting with Phil. And then after that interview, I'm going to play a new interview that I just had with Phil, where he talks about everything from in season 3 when he left Chuck to go on to NBC's Undercovers. That show ended up being canceled, and he went back to Chuck to the rest of season 4, and then now he's on Chuck in season 5. From their perspective, it's almost done. For us, it's just beginning. Friday nights, I do urge you to watch Chuck at 8 p.m., 7 Central on NBC. But it was great to check in with Phil and hear what he has to say about what's going on Chuck. But for right now, on to my interview with Chuck writer Phil Klemmer, back in season 2 of Chuck. Enjoy. This is Gray with Chuck versus the Podcast, and I'm here with Phil Klemmer, one of the writers from Chuck, and also of Veronica Mars. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm good, thanks.
So you have been very busy the last few weeks.
Yeah, we're shooting episode 19, and we just finished breaking 22 in the room last night.
Wow.
So that's season 2 for you.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we just broke for lunch, and we were rehearsing a Chevy Chase Scott Bakula standoff scene.
Wow.
So, you don't want to rush something like that. You got to savor every moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty amazing. We just heard this week that they had been cast, and
yeah,
that must be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. It's a little, awe-inspiring.
Oh, yeah. I was a big Quantum Leap fan myself.
Yeah. I mean, it's just to be working with Fletch is like, it's like the sum of my adolescent dreams come true.
Yeah.
Minus Kelly LeBrock.
Well, we're going to go way back, and then we'll get back to Chuck in the end.
Okay.
Of course, it's always really interesting to people to hear about how people got started and even what led to them having their roles. And so you grew up in North Carolina?
I grew up in Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. So I was born in Chapel Hill, and my parents moved back there. But, yeah, I spent most of my years in Virginia.
Mm-hmm. And yet you went to Stanford. What made you pick Stanford?
I was really looking to get pretty far away, and that was sort of the best I could come up with. But I was really into the idea of going to California, and I still am, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were a classics major, but what did you want to do at that time?
I think I was looking to be some sort of professor. I spent a semester in Rome, and then I chickened out when I realized how much additional schooling it would require for that to happen,
mm-hmm.
and how smart I would have to be, and I didn't really see it happening. So, I sort of just came down to Hollywood with a couple friends of mine, and we all just sort of bumbled around and tried to find jobs. The guy I came down here with actually wrote Iron Man last year.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I'm by far the least successful.
Well, I wouldn't say you've done too badly. Now, you got a job at Propaganda Films.
Yeah. That was the sort of hot place to be in the early to mid-'90s. There were just a bunch of really cool commercial and music video directors working there, like Spike Jonze and Mark Romanek and Michel Gondry and all these people who subsequently went on to crazy film fame. But yeah, that was my first job, working in a story department and reading feature screenplays and doing, summaries and critiques.
You must have read a lot of scripts in that time.
I didn't log it exactly, but some of my friends got up into like 2,000-3,000 range. I don't think I cracked 1,000.
Wow.
You become a bit like barbaric about other people's writing just because you have to after you've read a certain number, and I think I stopped myself before I got there, just knowing that I'd never be able to sort of write my own stuff if I had gotten my critical skills too sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to be able to dismiss something as quickly as possible since you're being paid by the script, so you become very, very just attuned to finding what's wrong with things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great chance to read an incredible amount of material, but just the numbers, you can only buy so many things, and you're reading however many dozens or 100 screenplays a week as a story department. So the numbers just say that you have to say no to 99% of everything, and
wow.
and maybe that's fair, but still you're taking people's dreams and stomping on them. So
wow.
Yeah.
So and you ended up actually doing some work with Michel Gondry.
Yeah, I guess I worked for him for about 3 years. I worked sort of between his most notable music videos and before his notable films.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a result of him working with me, but he basically, anything that people know him for, I wasn't with him at the time.
Oh, okay.
So we did a Chemical Brothers video that I have a brief cameo in, and we did a Charlie Kaufman movie, Human Nature, which unfortunately didn't make much of a splash, but yeah, those were my years with Michel. After Michel, I sort of moved into ghostwriting for directors and doing commercial and music video treatments, which are sort of the things that directors use to sell themselves to either ad agencies or, music labels.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I supported myself before I, got my first TV gig.
And so it was around that time that you landed your first TV gig on Veronica Mars. Can you tell the story about how you got that gig?
Yeah, well, I had sort of known Rob Thomas as a friend of a friend and then a friend based on his crazy Halloween parties, and I had slipped him a feature that I had written. It was sort of a young adult coming-of-age story, and he had a show on ESPN that he was doing called Playmakers.
Mm-hmm.
And he read it, and I guess he liked it okay, but then he told me that it was completely inappropriate for an NFL sports show.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year or two later, I saw him at an Oscar party, and he told me about he had a teen noir show that was set up at UPN, and he asked me if I'd ever written television, and I said no, and he basically gave me 2 weeks to get a spec episode together, and my wife was pregnant at the time, so I had plenty of motivation, so I think I did a 6 Feet Under, and I think he went on a honeymoon, or he went away with his girlfriend, and I guess took it with him, and I got an email from him, like in Turkey, saying like, oh, I really like it, and I'll show it to Warner Brothers, and I can't promise you anything, and, he got me a job, which is,
Wow, awesome.
Pretty incredible, yeah.
And you were there for all 3 seasons.
I was, yeah. I was, 65 episodes.
Wow. Great show, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you were...
Had shared with you in an email. I thought I'd watch a couple episodes to prepare for this interview, and I'm already on season 3.
Oh, man, you probably, remember it better than I do.
Yeah. No, really, really good show. I liked it a lot.
Oh, thank you.
And I love that episode at the end of season 2, the graduation, where you hear all the writers' names.
Oh, yeah. God, I forgot about all... Yeah, I basically put the name of every friend I ever had in Virginia. I basically, got all my high school friends out somewhere in the season.
Mm-hmm. It was a very unique show. You've got noir set in high school with mystery, intrigue, drama, and comedy with a very delicate tonal balance. Yeah,
it sounded like a disaster when it was, pitched to me. I was like, what is this? What are you even talking about?
Yeah.
And then, you read the pilot and completely understand it.
Yeah. And what were your favorite aspects of that show to write?
Well, I guess I sort of liked the way that it was divided up into, a mystery of the week. And then, having the Lily Kane murder, say, in season 1, I really liked having that sort of C-story runner that was always going in the background.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it opened up the world and sort of, I don't know, just the few pages that you devoted to it lent such a depth to, A stories of the week could sometimes be rather light, but it sort of gave it that noir like substance and creepiness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I really like that. It also, there were some really fun characters. I mean, there was the Dick Casablancas character who, I think he was basically like a stand-in in the pilot,
yeah.
And by the third season he was in the opening titles, and you had time to sort of discover these characters and give them a line and give them a couple lines and give them a storyline, and it was just so fun having a character like Dick, who's sort of all the worst parts of our collective personality as a writing staff,
yeah.
And just being able to sort of just cut loose on a guy who's so abhorrent and lovable.
Yeah, you got a little bit of that going on in Chuck as well.
Yeah, we do. I mean, when I read the Chuck pilot, the Morgan-Chuck relationship totally appealed to me. You have to read through this stack of 50 pilots when you're looking for a TV gig, and when you're on a CW show that is getting Veronica Mars numbers, you unfortunately have to do that every season.
Mm-hmm.
The second I read Chuck, the relationship between Chuck and Morgan, is so juvenile and codependent and funny, and sort of, it's something that I completely recognize, and I just, something that I hadn't really seen on television.
Mm-hmm.
It drew me in, and I mean, Chuck was, my favorite of that stack of 50 pilots, and, so glad that I get to write for it.
Yeah. Tell me how you ended up going from Veronica Mars to Chuck, because Veronica Mars, you still hadn't even heard whether it was canceled or not.
It really went out with a fizzle. I think it wasn't even till the upfronts that, even then, I think they were being very cagey about it coming back or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd gotten an offer from Chuck, which is, such a huge relief. But I think at the time I had to put some little clause in that if, Veronica Mars came back, that I would go with it, just because they're both Warner Brothers shows.
Mm-hmm.
But I was incredibly fortunate. You look around television and you talk about the shows you would really enjoy writing on, and unfortunately there's not that many of them on network, and to be able to go from a show like that to this is just so lucky.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's not a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, you wouldn't think so, but it's got a lot of similarities with Veronica Mars. You've got a very unique show that's got some mystery, got drama, it's got comedy, more action for sure.
Yeah.
Then you've got these A, B, and C storylines in Chuck. You've got the main story, then you've got the Buy More story, you've got the overarching story that goes across the whole season. Yeah. Would you say that a lot of your experience from Veronica Mars translates to Chuck? I'm
certainly writing just my sort of base impulses as a writer. I don't have to force them anyway. With Chuck, in a way, I think it's probably much closer than Veronica Mars was. I mean, for whatever reason, Rob Thomas, the young adult and the female protagonist, it's just it is his voice, inside and out. And yeah, I don't know. Chuck is a much more difficult show from a production standpoint, just because trying to marry action and comedy is the two most sort of time-consuming genres that you could ever think of producing, and to try to do both well and marry them with some sort of tonal harmony is just, from a production standpoint, it's incredibly difficult. From a writing standpoint, it's just I couldn't be happier. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, we have a great studio, and our crew is incredible. And, there's a reason that I can't even think of action comedies, I mean, you'd have to go back to A-Team or something to find a network show that kind of fits our mold. I don't even know what the closest thing would be. And, there's a reason. It's just really difficult, and it requires people like Zach and a lot of time and incredible amount of talent to pull it off.
Yeah. I love Terminator, Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Yeah.
I love Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, me too.
I love Heroes, but I find when I'm watching those shows that I miss the comedy.
Yeah, I imagine as a writer you must miss it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can't imagine doing one one without the other.
Yeah, and I think we're probably a little more children of the 80s.
Exactly.
Where we had our Lethal Weapon and Die Hard and all these Arnold Schwarzenegger movies where the comedy was just a part of it.
Yeah.
So tell me, Chuck has a much bigger budget. How does that affect your writing decisions?
I don't know if I'd say much bigger. It's like Notorious B.I.G. said, it's mo money, mo problems. Mm-hmm. It seems like more money, but, it certainly gets spent quickly doing the things we do week in and week out, and it certainly doesn't seem decadent. We still have to come up with a lot of compromise and creative solutions, and that's really a credit to the people on our crew who build the show. Mm-hmm. To me, it looks much more expensive than it is. Mm-hmm. We have a fantastic DP, and, we've learned how to, produce the show within our means. I think we were probably killing people in the beginning before you figure out what you can do and what you can do well. And, it's also nice. Veronica Mars shot out of town. It's so much different being on the same lot where your show's produced.
Probably a lot more work for you.
Yeah, we were sort of in this little bubble up in North Hollywood, and we'd get phone calls and dailies, but we wouldn't have to deal with the sort of repercussions of what we put on the page. But, now we're a quarter mile away from our stages. But it's nice knowing that you can go down there and see it being made. Mm-hmm.
You're also taking more of a producing role on this show.
Yeah, that's just, the sort of hierarchy of writing titles. At a certain point, you get called a producer, whether you produce or not, but certainly the producers on Chuck can claim their title, and especially when it's your episode, you get to be involved in all aspects of production, from casting to concept meetings to, being on set and collaborating with the director, and that's great. That's something that we didn't get to do on Veronica Mars, just because of the being out of town.
Yeah. So tell me, who is your favorite character to write for on Chuck?
Favorite character? Clearly writing for Chuck, it's, like I said, it's a protagonist who's much closer to my sort of baseline personality than Veronica Mars ever was. Mm-hmm. Having a geeky hero who gets to sort of live his dreams is it's sort of my dream.
Yeah.
Doing Chuck versus Tom Sawyer, our fifth episode this season, and getting to take Jeff, who, was kind of one of the Buy More guys who's more in the background, and getting to elevate him to the star of the episode, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Because he was a guy that always sort of did well with the few lines that we gave him, but just allowing Scott to sort of step into the limelight and seeing what a great job he did, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Would that be your favorite episode you've written so far, or do you have other favorite episodes or scenes that you've done?
I got to pick the episode I'm working on now. I got to assume that's going to be the best, even though we're just a few days into it. But yeah, I guess I don't really look back on it that much.
Yeah. How does it feel to watch them when they air?
I think the very first Veronica Mars, it really freaked me out because, when you see a cut, you're not seeing anything close to the 41 minutes and however many seconds that airs. You're seeing just a rough assembly without any of the sort of tweaking and audio and effects, and so the first Veronica Mars I ever saw, I was just like, oh my God, this is a disaster. And so you sort of learn to condition yourself to what you should expect at various stages, but seeing something that's aired, I'd really like to go back and watch something that hasn't aired for a number of seasons, because if it's too fresh in your mind, you're just sort of looking for what you missed. Mm-hmm. And, I think at this point I've forgotten what we missed with Veronica Mars and could probably wholly enjoy it. Someday soon I hope to be able to do that with Chuck, and obviously I hope Chuck goes for 5 seasons. And I really feel like the show is it's getting better and better. And I really feel that the strike was, not a good thing for anybody, but I think, as a writing staff, we really used the time wisely to take a step back and to figure out how we wanted to relaunch the show.
Yeah.
You're a fan of it. I hope you agree, but
from a writing standpoint, I would think that the strike would be a good thing, because you'd have a chance to actually see all of the first season to fruition.
Yeah.
You just figured out what you're going to do in the finale episode, and episode 12 hasn't even aired this season.
Yeah.
So you can't even really gauge fan reaction until a half a season later.
Yeah.
You're a little subjective from the inside, but I would say that I don't know many other shows that have had such a strong second season after a strong first season. like just from a viewer's standpoint, I would say every single episode is strong, and all indications are that it's going to just keep on going that way. So
yeah, I have no choice but to be a cheerleader, but even if I didn't, like, I really think that the second half of the season even continues to go up, and I think that's a credit to the people I work with.
Mm-hmm. And the ratings are creeping up?
Compared to everyone else, they might be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody's fully recovered from the strike.
Yeah.
But I really think that we have more audience out there. They're just waiting to discover the show.
Yeah.
We have this big 3D episode that comes after the Super Bowl, and we're all hoping that that's going to be a chance for a lot of new viewers to come to the show.
Well, I do think that there's a lot of people who watch outside of the Nielsen system.
Yeah.
Particularly for Chuck. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Chuck isn't the biggest show in terms of Nielsen ratings, but our podcast is actually the #1 TV show podcast.
Oh, man, don't say that. That makes me nervous. There's too many people listening. I'd actually just gotten my head around that this was just a conversation. But no, I got stage fright.
I think that's an indication of the target audience. I mean, the target audience is plugged in. They're the kind of people who would watch differently than the way that Nielsen measures.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I made a Zune joke in an episode, and I don't think you could make a Zune joke and have it be received by an audience who wasn't a little bit geeky.
Yeah.
And I do apologize for the Zune joke because Microsoft is a fantastic sponsor, and we should call this a Zunecast maybe.
Yeah. Well, back to the story. It was said in a previous interview that you are a logician who's very good at continuity.
I don't know who said that.
I've got the quote somewhere, but that was obviously something that you needed very much on Veronica Mars. But
mm-hmm.
Are you involved with the longer plot arcs of Chuck, or is this really Josh and Chris's domain?
I think everybody in the writing staff is. I think in the very beginning, Josh and Chris asked me how we approach the sort of mythological, murder mystery of Lily Kane in season 1. But one of the great things about coming to work so early, we started in March of this year, is that, we didn't have to dive in with episode 201. We were able to take, a couple weeks to just figure out in broad strokes where we wanted to go with the season.
Mm-hmm. And,
it's just amazing once you map things out, how much quicker it comes when you just have some sort of, even a thumbnail structure for the series. As we're all hoping to come back for season 3, I think that's something that we'll do again.
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes the individual episodes so much easier to break if you know where you're going in a sort of global sense.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's a bigger writing staff for sure.
Uh-huh.
And looking at least at IMDb, people have come from a whole wide range of shows. I mean, you've got Scott Rosenbaum coming from The Shield. You've got Ali Adler with a lot more comedy shows. You're coming from Veronica Mars.
Yeah.
Would you say that makes you come into the room with specialties, or is one person a go-to person for comedy, another person a go-to person for action, or are you all kind of just a melting pot?
I don't know, as a viewer, does it seem like a consistent show, or because it seems like just by the sort of nature of the show, it's sort of like a pop amalgam.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really does lend itself, like there's just any number of ways you can sort of choose your own genre for an episode. And I think as a disparate writing staff, we all sort of love that you can put your fortes forward. And if I want to be a geek and write a geeky episode about, a guy playing geeky video games, you can do that. And if you want to have a hard-boiled episode that, the show can just sort of morph into so many things, and I guess that's what it just keeps the show exciting, that if you want to try on something else, you know that you can always do that.
You guys are doing it well. That was leading on to my next question, but from a viewer standpoint, you would swear that every episode was written by the same writer.
It's incredibly flattering, and maybe that's just sort of a byproduct of having been stuffed into a room with each other for a year and a half. But being on a writing staff is kind of a bizarre working environment, just to be stuffed into a room for 10 hours a day with people who a year and a half ago were complete strangers, and it's no small miracle when you can actually get along with those people and arrive at some sort of communal product in which everybody feels a bit of ownership, and it's pretty fantastic. You can imagine all the ways it could go wrong, but when it goes right, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, you've co-written a lot of scripts. You wrote quite a few with John Enbaum and with other co-writers as well.
Yeah.
And just looking at the credits of Chuck, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of co-writing going on. Is that true?
I think co-writing is usually just done for expediency. When we had a small staff, it was sort of, you just had to get scripts out quickly and get people back in the room and breaking story.
Mm-hmm.
There's some shows that, I guess Heroes used to, or maybe they still do, break up scripts by, actual characters and have people writing, individual storylines. But I think it's much more common for people to have their own episodes, and the times we've done it on Chuck are, the times where we just need to get caught up with production.
Mm-hmm. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge relief to make it to the end of a season and to have not succumbed to the beast that is production. They're always breathing down your neck, and every stumble you have, you just count the days. And once you're behind, you're always behind, and the material suffers. And the fact that we've made it to the finish line is a huge relief.
Mm-hmm. So who comes up with the original ideas for the episodes?
I think in the 2 weeks that we sort of just brainstormed, we put together, we had a little pile of log lines that we wanted to come back to, and it's amazing how many of those became, at least the kernels for the episodes, the A stories that we did this season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, there's nothing worse than just coming to the table and having no notion of what you want to do. Somebody had seen the King of Kong documentary over our strike/hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
And just having, those 3 words, it's enough to sort of inspire a discussion about what we could do and what we'd like an episode to be. And I think something like 4 or 5 days later, we had broken the story for Chuck versus Tom Sawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And, it could have been 3 weeks of just staring at the walls.
Yeah.
But just having a tiny little foothold is really such an advantage.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what would you say a typical workday is for you?
Well, I think it changes as the season goes along. As a writer in the room working on somebody else's episode, it's sort of, arriving at 10 o'clock and arguing about lunch for anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours, and, spending the next 6 to 8 hours in the room. And it's really interesting because, a lot of room time is BS time and funny anecdote time and just riffing on things that have nothing to do with story or Chuck, but,
Charging your batteries.
Yeah, and then once in a while you'll just happen upon some weird tangent that, stokes the fire, and then you'll have days where you do nothing but work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you kind of have to be ready to come in the room and, see where the day takes you.
Yeah.
Being with a bunch of people that you'd want to be stuck in a room with, even if it weren't your job, is very, very helpful.
Yeah. You still get time for tennis?
I have time for tennis, but my tennis partner is he's running his own show now, so unfortunately I'm taking a bit of a tennis hiatus.
John's running a show?
Yeah, he's got a show called Party Down that's going to be on Starz Network.
Really, really? Good for him.
Yeah. It's a show that he and Rob Thomas and Paul Rudd and Dan Etheridge came up with 3 or 4 years ago. And It just came out of nowhere, and he was able to go and write 10 episodes, and I think they're going to be shot within a month or something. So that's how quick television works.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, just on the topic of Rob Thomas, I've heard that he's still keeping the vision alive for a Veronica Mars movie.
Is that true?
I've heard that. It's been written about online. There was a little pitch that he put together that's on the season 3 DVD.
Oh, man.
But I'd heard even just recently that the idea was revived again.
Wow. I hope Kristen Bell's involved.
She's going to be on Lost.
Oh, is she?
This season. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Who's she going to be?
No idea.
Wow. That'd be cool. Yeah, I know he's busy with Cupid now, and I heard about a Veronica Mars comic book, but features, that's news to me. I mean, a video game, I could get behind that.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny, writing Veronica Mars, a teen girl show, all we did was play video games, and now I'm on a show about guys who play video games, and all we do is sit around and gossip like teenage girls, so.
one of the things, especially breaking news this week about all the stars that are going to be...
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Chevy Chase, we've got Scott Bakula, we've got Dominic Monaghan. How does it change your writing process when you have kind of a higher profile guest star?
Well, it's a little scary. Like, it's sort of nice when you've written a script and then you start talking names.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's pretty intimidating to have to consider writing for Chevy Chase, because you start thinking of every Chevy Chase thing you've ever watched and how your writing can never sort of live up to Fletch. But, you know, knowing the sort of type of people you're going to go for is helpful, just because you know how much screen time and sort of importance within the story you're going to give to those roles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the nightmare scenario would be if you write like a minor role and then you hear, yeah, we want to go out to Kevin Kline with this, and then you have to go back and sort of tweak a script. But fortunately, we knew that the 2 guest roles for the episode that we're shooting now were going to be big. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what are your other favorite shows to watch right now?
I sort of went crazy for Mad Men,
mm-hmm.
and I watched season 2 and then season 1. I sort of fell off with Battlestar. I just saw the premiere of Lost last night, which I'm pretty psyched about.
Mm-hmm. I actually missed it. I was talking to Norman Buckley, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know. What are you watching?
Well, Chuck, of course.
Yeah.
Heroes, Terminator, Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Uh-huh.
I love that new Life on Mars.
I haven't seen that yet. I want to see that.
And The Mentalist is good, too. I don't generally go for the procedurals, but I think that's a really good one.
Yeah.
I got to do some fan questions.
Yeah, of course.
One fan question is, will we see Harry Tang again?
I mean, if we had our way, we totally would. You know, that was just a booking conflict. I guess his role on Dexter took him away from us.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I should say that he was incredibly fun. And Tony Hale, I love writing Tony Hale. I got to, introduce him this season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so nice having a villain in the Buy More. I think
yeah.
The show really sort of needed that niche filled, and I think it's great.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah.
We've heard that Chuck might be doing some spy training. Everybody's asking about that.
Spy training. I got to be coy about answering that one.
Yeah.
I guess I could say, in a way, yes. I hope that's enigmatic enough.
Yeah, I know you have to be enigmatic with the spoilers. Josh Schwartz has teased that you guys are pulling out all the stops in the last half of the season, and in particular the finale. Is there anything you can tell us about where things will be going?
I'm such a dummy. I'll wind up giving something terrible away that'll ruin the season for everyone. But we're certainly pulling out all the stops. I mean, we sort of broke episode 21, the second to last, and we're just like,
mm-hmm.
Oh my God, it's like that. It feels like a finale, and we still have another one to break. And when you want to keep a show on the air in this like weird time for television, unfortunately, you sort of have to push everything and everyone to an inch of breaking. And the fact that our production has been able to keep up with our impossible expectations, it's pretty tremendous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we all hope Chuck is renewed for a 3rd season, but outside of that, do you have any other future plans?
No, we finished season 2 last night, and I expect that we'll all be around the table on Monday and talking about season 3 as if it's going to be there, I think that's kind of all we can do.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's just about all I've got. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, and hope to stay in touch with you.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
That was Phil Klemmer back in Season 2. Well, here is Phil Klemmer as I caught up with him in Season 5. Enjoy. This is Gray, and I'm here with Phil Klemmer, writer for Chuck. How you doing, Phil?
I'm great, thanks.
It's great to have you on the podcast, and boy, I mean, you are no stranger to Chuck fans. You're no stranger to podcasts. I mean, first of all, you did a podcast for Veronica Mars, or
yep.
At least a few of them, and then you were on the Chuck. I think you've actually been on the Chuck podcast more than any other person.
That's it's an honor. I once in a while I will IMDb myself, just when I'm feeling like I need some sort of reminder that I've accomplished something. And seeing the number of scripts, there is some satisfaction in just being like, wow. That's kind of a lot of episodes.
Well, it was kind of neat, and the people listening to this podcast will have just heard the first interview you did with me back in Season 2, and so we don't have to cover those same bases. But in that interview, I don't know if you remember, but
no recollection.
It was early in season 2, and you said, "I believe that Chuck can go 5 seasons."
Oh, geez, now it seems like a paltry number. But yeah, at the time that was meant to be a vote of confidence. But yeah, standing on the precipice of season 5, it doesn't feel like it's lost its legs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, apparently this is it.
Yeah. Wow. So we'll get to post Chuck,
right,
and toward the end. But how does it? Well, and we'll get to how it feels to be back as well. What I want to get to is the dispersion that happened at the end of season 3, and I know I blogged about it a little bit. It was a tough situation. You basically, the shows were being picked up, and Chuck wasn't at that point. And we saw a number of offers come in, and Ali Adler left, Scott Rosenbaum left, Matt Miller left, and Zev Burrow left.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so what were you thinking at the time? And this is not uncommon to what happened to you with Veronica Mars as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me that kind of feels like business as usual, but in reality, shows are either alive or dead, and somehow I've managed to pick the zombie shows that are neither, that sort of persist after people have said they were deep in the ground. And yeah, that was a really, really hard time because, as long as you're under contracts, you can sort of take comfort in the fact there's nothing I can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to offer me a job, they have to understand that should Chuck come back, I'm protected. But, the magical 3-year mark is when, as writers, your contracts are gone, and then you're sort of without that. You're without that obligation, and you're sort of thrown into the fray. And I think that it's wonderful that Chuck is such a shining, respected credit, that those of us who were tossed into the fray, found these amazing jobs. Because, I think it's worth a lot to have worked on the show. But the problem with that is that, we all sort of went to the 4 winds, and yeah, it was a sad time. And then, sort of found out that Chuck was coming back once we'd all landed elsewhere. And then that's another kind of, then you realize that the show's going to go on without you. It was really weird. And, it's really weird for me because, I only moved about 100 yards across the lot.
Oh my.
So it wasn't like I just left. It was I left my wife for the woman across the street. So it was a very conflicted time because I felt like a turncoat who just walked across the street to undercovers. And I think it was ultimately good to have taken a break from Chuck, though. I think it made last year and the 13 episodes this year, I think it was nice to have a bit of perspective, thanks to the break.
Well, it worked out quite ironically in that, first of all, you were brought on a show that had a married spy couple, so you probably were on the show that was closest in some ways to Chuck, but
yeah, and on the same network.
Yeah, but Undercovers died early. No Ordinary Family didn't get renewed,
right?
And the show that Matt Miller went to, Human Target, that didn't get renewed, and then Scott Rosenbaum's V didn't get renewed, and so everybody that went on to different shows, all of a sudden they were out of luck, and then Chuck kept on ticking. But you had an opportunity to come back. Tell me a little bit about, actually maybe wind back a little bit when you went on Undercovers and it wasn't doing well. What was happening there, and what were you thinking?
Well, it wasn't clear that it wasn't doing well until we were, deep into our, run of 13 episodes, because we started The Room very early because it was a, super high profile show. And, we had these massive shoots that were mostly, outside the lot. There was a lot of money and a lot of production going into it. So we had broken more than half of our stories by the time we even premiered. So it wasn't apparent that it was a failing show until, thank God, because once it becomes apparent, it's really, really hard to continue because you've sort of invested everything you had. And, on that show, I think we were all imagining that it would be a version of an NBC hit. And, we were all really proud of it. And then, it's almost like television has become like feature films where you get that sort of Monday box office and you sort of know the whole life course of the film, whether it's a hit or a flop.
Yeah.
And television sort of turned into that. Like, I mean, it was the night before Undercover's premiere and we got the NBC sort of estimates for our number and we're just like, oh God.
Oh no.
Like, we're dead.
Yeah.
Like, because shows don't stick around like long enough to sort of,
find their legs.
Right. Live a second life. So once that had happened, it was pretty damn glum because we all liked the show and we liked each other. And that was a sensation I've never had, like being on like a show that's like, I have this like ridiculous, unfounded sort of optimism, like that you can only get from having been on Veronica Mars and Chuck, where you're like, it'll be fine, we'll get picked up, like, Yeah. And this is like, that was the one time where it's like, no, seriously, this is happening. And I guess it's incredible that I've only had that really happen once, because I had already taken the job on Chuck by the time bad news about Veronica Mars came in. So I've always sort of had a foot planted somewhere.
So this time when it happened, you were just 100 yards away.
Yep.
But tell me about how that happened. And I remember how excited we were. It was last holiday episode of the podcast that we announced it. And how did that happen? They got you back? Because I mean, that's strange to me because once you're staffed, I thought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it helped that it was all happening within Warner Brothers, and it helped that I was coming back to a show that I had already been on. And yeah, I totally remembered like where I was when I got the call that Chuck was looking for writers. I was like on set of Undercovers.
Wow. And
I just remember thinking like, I'm not ready to be like alone in my home office. I was like, I really need to continue moving, and I don't want to sit around and I mean, it was literally like I had left Undercovers and I went and had Thanksgiving and I came back and I sat down at the Chuck table and
wow.
It was totally like the right mental health move where I could just be like, I mean, the first week was really surreal because it was like, did I ever leave? And like it's,
yeah.
But quickly, the new bunch of people, it felt like, it felt like this had always been the Chuck show.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I have a question all the way from Australia.
Okay.
Kevin from Australia says, what were the biggest changes you found coming back to the writer's room, and what changes made you most excited?
Well, I mean, the most changes were just people are fresh, and the show was new to everyone, and so I feel like the thing about like a writer's room is at least I sort of take my energy from the people around me, and if everybody's beleaguered and beat down, that's how I feel, and if everybody's like energetic and charged about breaking story, that's how I feel. I guess I'm a chameleon that way, and so it was awesome coming onto a show where it's not like people ever got bored of these characters. I mean, I feel like it's as fun to write the show as it was, episode 105, the first one I ever did. But you do get this like cumulative fatigue that you feel like every season you sort of come back like a little more tired, or you hit like that point of exhaustion sooner. By season 3, we were all pretty tired, and we only did 16 episodes, right? So the fact that we did 24 the year after, I mean, I feel like that would have killed the original gang, but like having the fresh blood, there was this sort of like just like irrepressible energy to the room. And you get to make new friends, and like totally have like, I would follow this bunch anywhere. Yeah. On any show.
Oh yeah. I mean, Christian Newman, Craig DeGorio, DeGorio, and of course, Rafe and Lauren, you knew from season 3, but
Yeah. And then, one of my fellow writers came over, Alex Katz-Nelson came over from Undercover. So I mean, there was a strange continuity to it. You know, my big like business idea now is that like writers should actually just syndicate themselves and like staff en masse.
Yeah.
So that, you know, instead of trying to take these collections of people that might or might not work, that you could actually just like hire an intact staff.
Room for hire.
Yeah, because it would be so much. I mean, there's so many disasters out there of great people and great writers who just cannot work together, and it's sort of a miracle when it works out. So, if anybody wants to help me figure out how to market that, I'm sure the agents will find a way to stop it.
Yeah. Well, Craig and Kristen are writing a pilot together.
Yep.
Who knows? Maybe some of the gang will go together.
Yeah, I think that's the only way you can sort of survive in your middle to late career is just relying on the mercy of the friends you've accumulated in the first half.
Yeah. And then Chuck gets picked up for season 5. And it's a shorter season, 13 episodes. And this time, I remember actually in our interview we did another interview in season 3, and you thought you were only getting 13 episodes then.
Right. So it was 19. Sorry.
Yeah, it ended up being 19.
Yeah.
But that was when you already had written, like thoroughly written to episode 13, and then had to tack 6 on after that, which is difficult. This time...
It's really difficult, yeah.
Yeah. This time, you've got 13, and you have 13, and that's it. How does that feel?
More episodes would be staggering to imagine having to sort of start up all the machinery again. Just because it's like running. When you pace yourself and you know how far you're going to go, the last thing you want is somebody at the finish line to say like, do another 2 miles. But the greatest thing on earth would be, you know, when you're on Lost and they're like, yeah, you're picked up for 3 more seasons of 16 apiece.
Wow.
I mean, when you have the security and the sort of reduced episode load, so that, you know, I mean, if they were like, you know, Chuck is really pulling a great number, season 6, I would be like, yeah, that is perfect. That would be, you know, the show going away is obviously something that we all mourn, but the idea of doing additional episodes would be something that would, obviously it's better than the show going off the air, but it would be really daunting. So, yeah, if there's any way they could pick us up for 3 more seasons of 16, I don't know what that would take.
Yeah, but you can't end with it all being everybody in purgatory or heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Charlie from Illinois asks a question that I'm sure on everybody's minds, and that's, what's the mood like on set these days since the end is fast approaching? Because really, production ends in November, doesn't it?
I can look at a schedule right now. It ends 11... Oh, no. It ends 12/7/11.
12/7. Wow.
Yeah, I think the mood is really good because, you know, people on the crew work harder than anybody in the entire operation. They work longer and it's more stressful, and especially our cast. I mean, you know, I'm sure they're all running on adrenaline now, just knowing that they aren't going to have to go into the new year. I'm pulling 14-hour days, but I don't think the sort of bittersweetness has really kicked in yet, but I'm sure it will any day. That when you start realizing, like, oh, this is the last scene I'll have with this person, or this is the last time we'll be in this, you know, stage look, you know, I'm sure that's going to be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, even on Undercovers, when we'd only done 13 episodes, when they film that last scene, it is so damn eerie. You're just like, all right, and this is the last someone will ever speak a word, and this is the last frame of film.
Wow.
And I can't imagine what that's going to feel like with 5 years behind it. But right now, I think everybody's probably doing their best to pretend that day's not going to happen.
Well, I know, I mean, we've only seen 1 episode so far this season, but it does seem like there is, I mean, there's such a chemistry, a long fought for chemistry between the characters, but also it seems like there's a bit of a release. Like, it seems like the actors are just kind of having fun
mm-hmm.
on screen. Like it just looks like they're so much more comfortable maybe now that they know that this is it. So what do they have to lose?
Yeah, I think you're totally picking up on something. And like, I don't know, it's not like as writers we're working any harder this year. I mean, you sort of always try to break the best stories you can.
Mm-hmm.
But there something was sort of happening like in the first half, like, maybe just a few episodes in the season where we all just started to realize that the episodes were coming in really good. And, you get good episodes or episodes that you like more than others, but it was sort of like, we definitely had this run where it was like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like all these, and the great premiere episode of the season as well. Like, we were just like, they're all coming in good.
Yeah.
And none of them are needing like emergency measures in post-production. And we're not reshooting scenes. And we're not, creating Frankenstein episodes. And, they were just, we're not coming in with things that are like hugely over or, hugely under. I think, people just get really good at doing their jobs, and the sort of cumulative effect of that is like you can do more with less. And, even though we have less time and less money and less energy, all the episodes were sort of like working. And that's pretty cool that that we all learned how to do this a little better. And, I hope that people watching the show feel that sort of quality, but I think it's true.
Yeah. Well, I know we have to wrap up shortly, but tell me, do you have any plans for afterward?
Well, I'm going to go to New Zealand.
Wow.
So that's a plan.
Yeah.
And presumably I'll come back, but, who knows? I'm going to take a little time and, see what's happening in the springtime. And, until then I'll work on a pilot of my own and catch up on all the television I've been missing by writing it.
Cool. And just before I leave you, do you have any breaking in tips for new writers?
Let me see. My tips would be, if you say you're a writer, you should actually write, because I did that for a long time. I just called myself a writer, which doesn't quite work. You should try to get a job as a writer's assistant. I know it sounds like impossible, but like being in a writer's room, being anywhere close to the writer's room is the quickest way to sort of land yourself a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think just like getting those early episodes out of the way by just writing a couple specs based on other people's shows so that you can eventually write your own, just don't be uptight about it. It's only television. That's what I would say. That like, I mean, the best thing about having a job in TV is just it forces you to write all the time. And that, I used to really stress out about every letter that I typed on a keyboard. And there's something zen about like letting go and letting the words flow and getting better at it just by whatever your 10,000 hours. I'm probably not there yet, but I'm trying to do my best.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking this time. And oh, hey, did Craig and his wife have the baby?
Yes, they did have the baby.
Very cool.
Which is why he's probably too tired to do this podcast. But yes, he's got a baby. It's Cleo Antonia Di Gregorio. And yes, she's Italian.
Very cool.
But yes, a beautiful, healthy little girl.
Very, very cool. Well, thanks for taking the time, and
sure.
Best of luck to you, and hopefully we'll hear of great things in the future from Mr. Phil Klemmer.
Great talking with you. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Phil. And that's the podcast for today. I want to remind you that you can go to tvwriterpodcast.com for all of the back episodes of the podcast, or you can also go to blip.tv/tvwriterpodcast. And as well, I encourage you to follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. @GrayJones is my handle. Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web. And by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide.